Emma stood pressed into the shadow of the corridor archway, small fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe, close enough to see everything happening in the dining room, but far enough that no one had noticed her yet. She watched her mother on her knees, on the Persian rug, dabbing at a spreading wine stain while 15 guests looked on, some with pity, most pretending not to look at all. She watched the woman in the emerald dress standing over her mother, arms crossed, voice sharp enough to cut through the clink of glasses and low music. Emma didn't understand every word, but she understood the shape of it. She understood her mother's shoulders, curled small and tight the way they got right before the crying started later, alone, behind the laundry room door. Emma slipped back into the corridor, out of sight, and pulled her mother's old phone from the little pocket of her dress, the one Cassandra had shown her weeks ago, made her practice on, made her repeat the numbers until they lived somewhere deep and automatic in her small hands. Only if something is really wrong, baby. Only if mommy needs you to be brave. Emma pressed the numbers now, glancing once more through the archway at her mother's bent shoulders, at the woman in emerald still talking, still smiling that cold smile before lifting the phone to her ear. It rang once, twice. A deep voice answered, clipped with irritation, party noise humming behind him. Who is this? Mr. Jiang. Emma kept her voice low, the way her mother had taught her, eyes still fixed through the archway on the scene unfolding just feet away. My mommy is crying again. The mean lady made her cry. She's making her clean it right now on the floor, in front of everybody. Please come see. The line went dead in Emma's small hand before she could say anything else. She tucked the phone back into her pocket and stayed exactly where she was, in the shadow of the archway, watching her mother's bent back, waiting. If this hit you like it hit us, smash that like button right now, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from tonight. This story is about to get heavy. Stay with us. Cassandra Williams had been on her knees for almost 4 full minutes, dabbing club soda into the deep red bloom spreading across a rug that cost more than she'd earned in 3 years. Combined, when Choi Hwang's voice cracked over her head like a whip. Slower, you're grinding it in. Honestly, did no one teach you anything useful in whatever backwater town you crawled out of? Cassandra kept her eyes down, kept her hands moving because looking up meant giving Choi Hwang exactly the reaction she wanted. Yes, ma'am. I'll fix it. You'll fix it, Choi Hwang repeated, voice pitched just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, just soft enough to seem almost private, almost reasonable. That's rich. You've had a year in this house and you still don't know how to hold a serving tray without tipping it. I spilled that wine because your clumsy hand set my glass too close to the edge in the first place. A ripple of discomfort moved through the closest guests. A few looked away, embarrassed on Cassandra's behalf. One woman near the fireplace murmured something to her husband that might have been sympathy, or might have been simple relief that it wasn't happening to her. No one said anything. No one ever did. I'm sorry, ma'am, Cassandra said, because the words cost her nothing anymore. She'd spent them so many times over the last 9 months they'd worn smooth and hollow, like river stones. This wasn't new, and that was the part that frightened her most. She remembered the first time clearly, months ago, back when she still believed a single apology could fix things. A Tuesday afternoon, when Choi Hwang had found her refolding towels in the linen closet and declared without preamble that the folds were beneath the standard of any house that mattered, making Cassandra unfold and refold 19 towels while she watched, arms crossed, until her hands ached and her eyes burned. Cassandra had gone home that night and cried quietly into Emma's hair, telling herself it was a fluke, a bad day, nothing that would repeat itself. It had repeated itself, again and again, each time smaller than the last, each time easier to explain away, until 9 months had passed and she could no longer remember what it felt like to walk through this house without flinching. Sorry doesn't get this rug clean, does it? On your knees, all the way. I want to see you actually working, not just pretending for my benefit. Cassandra lowered herself further, palms flat against the rug, and felt something in her chest crack quietly down the middle even as her face stayed perfectly, Practice still. This was the part no one saw. Not the insults, which were bad enough, but the specific choreography of humiliation Choi Hwang had perfected over months. Not just correction, display, a performance staged for an audience, timed and angled so Cassandra's degradation became a form of entertainment for people who would never remember her name in the morning. She didn't see Emma in the corridor. She didn't know her daughter was watching every second of it. Phone already pressed to her ear, or that 4 floors away in his own home, a man who ran an empire that men twice his age still feared was about to receive a phone call that would end everything Choi Hwang thought she'd built. Jiang Sung's phone buzzed against the inside of his suit jacket in the middle of a conversation about shipping routes through the port of Newark, the kind of conversation he'd normally never interrupt for anything short of an emergency. He almost let it ring through. Then he saw the contact name, a number he'd given Emma himself months ago, half as a joke, half because something in him had wanted the small girl to know she could call if she ever needed to. "Excuse me," he said to the men around him, already stepping away, already answering. "Who is this?" "Mr. Jiang, my mommy is crying again. The mean lady made her cry. She's making her clean it right now on the floor, in front of everybody. Please come see." The line went dead. Jiang Sung stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds, the din of his own engagement party roaring distantly around him, before something in his chest turned to ice, and then, immediately after, to fire. Choi Hwang was still talking when Jiang Sung reappeared in the dining room doorway, jaw set, eyes scanning past her entirely to the woman kneeling on the rug at her feet. "Cassandra!" Cassandra's head snapped up at the sound of her name in his voice, not the clipped tone he used with staff, but something raw, something that sounded almost like fear. Emma, still hidden in the corridor archway, watched Jiang Sung cross the room in 4 long strides and crouch down beside her mother, ignoring Choi Hwang entirely, ignoring the 15 guests who'd gone suddenly, uncomfortably silent. "Get up," he said quietly to Cassandra. "You don't have to do this. Not another second of it." Comment below right now. Do you think Jiang Sung already suspected something was wrong before this moment, or is this the first time he's truly seeing it? I want your theories. Drop a like if this scene has your chest tight already. Let's keep going. Cassandra rose slowly, her knees aching, wine soaking into the fabric of her uniform, humiliation burning hotter across her face than it had in months, because now there were witnesses to the fact that someone had finally noticed. Choi Hwang's expression flickered. Surprise? Then something colder settling in behind it. "Jiang, what are you doing? She's mid-task. This is hardly the—" "We're done here," Jiang Sung said, not looking at her. "Cassandra, go find Emma. I'll come to speak with you in a few minutes." Cassandra's stomach dropped. "Emma, sir, she's supposed to be with the nanny upstairs. She wasn't—" A small voice cut through the tension before Cassandra could finish. "I'm right here, Mommy." Every head in the room turned toward the corridor archway, where Emma stood clutching her mother's old phone in both hands, chin lifted with a bravery that made Cassandra's heart simultaneously swell and shatter. "Emma," Cassandra breathed, crossing the room in 3 quick steps and pulling her daughter against her chest. "Baby, what are you doing down here? You're supposed to be—" "I called Mr. Jiang," Emma said simply, muffled against her mother's shoulder. "You were crying again. I did what you taught me." Cassandra's eyes filled instantly, mortification and love and terror tangling together in her chest all at once. She looked up and found Jiang Sung watching them both, something unreadable moving behind his expression. "You taught her to call me," he said slowly. "It wasn't a question." "I gave her the number months ago," Cassandra admitted, voice barely above a whisper now, guests still watching, Choi Hwang's face going rigid with fury near the fireplace. "In case something happened to me, in case I ever wasn't able to protect her myself. I never thought she'd actually—" Her voice broke. "I never thought it would come to this." Jiang Sung's jaw tightened, understanding landing on him all at once, not just that his fiancée had humiliated a member of his staff, but that this woman had been afraid enough, for long enough, to arm a 3-year-old with an emergency escape plan. "We're finishing this conversation privately," he said, now. If you're already emotional, and we're not even 15 minutes in, wait until you see what's coming. Subscribe now if you want to catch every part of this story as it drops. Drop a comment with the number 1 if Choi Hwang deserves everything that's coming to her. He led Cassandra and Emma into his study, closing the door on the stunned silence of the dining room, on Choi Hwang's furious, frozen expression, on 9 months of quiet cruelty that had just cracked open in front of 15 witnesses. "Sit," he said gently, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Cassandra sat, Emma still curled against her side, and for a long moment, Jiang Sung simply looked at both of them, something working behind his eyes. "How long?" he said finally. "I need the truth, all of it, from the beginning." Cassandra's hands trembled in her lap. She'd rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times over the last 9 months, and never once believed she'd actually be given the chance to say it out loud. "Since the 3rd month," she said. "Maybe earlier, but that's when it stopped feeling like normal correction and started feeling like something else. She calls me the help in front of you, like I don't have a name of my own. She's made me redo perfectly good work because she says my hands smell like poverty. She's humiliated me at 3 separate dinner parties now, always in front of an audience, always timed so no one can call it anything but discipline. Why didn't you come to me?" Cassandra let out a laugh with no humor in it at all, the words coming faster now, like something long damned finally breaking loose. "Because people like me don't get believed over people like her, Mr. Jiang. Not ever. Not in a house like this one. I've survived being abandoned pregnant by a man who couldn't handle the idea of fatherhood. I've survived working 3 jobs on 4 hours of sleep so my daughter never went hungry. I know exactly what happens to women like me when we speak up against women like her. We lose. Every single time. So I did the math, and I decided silence was cheaper than losing this job and everything it gives Emma." "What did you think I would do? If you told me, I thought you'd smile and nod and tell me you'd look into it," Cassandra said, voice shaking now. "And then nothing would change, because she's the one you're marrying, and I'm the one who cleans up after the wedding. I thought I'd lose my job and my home, and my daughter's school and everything I've spent a year rebuilding, all because I asked a rich man to believe me over his own fiancée. That's not paranoia, Mr. Jiang. That's just how this world works for women like me." Jiang Sung absorbed this like a physical blow, something in his expression cracking open entirely. He glanced at Emma, who watched him with a solemn, unblinking seriousness only small children seem capable of, and something in him seemed to settle, decided, unmovable. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Not the kind of sorry that fixes anything tonight, but I need you to hear it anyway. I failed you. I failed both of you. That ends tonight. I promise you that. We're building to something big. If you believe him right now, comment, 'I believe him,' below. If you think there's more to come before this is really over, comment that too. Either way, stay with us. This story is just getting started." Cassandra was dismissed to the staff quarters with Emma, while Jiang Sung remained behind, and it was there, alone with her daughter finally settling into sleep, that the weight of everything caught up to her all at once. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed and let herself remember, for the first time in months, exactly how she'd ended up here. 2 years before Greenwich, before the mansion, before Jiang Sung, Cassandra Williams had been a kindergarten teacher in a small district outside Columbus, Ohio, engaged to a man who left the moment 2 pink lines appeared on a test in her bathroom. She raised Emma alone from her first breath, working a teaching assistant job by day and waiting tables 3 nights a week, surviving on the kind of exhaustion that lived permanently behind her eyes. In the middle of that survival, she'd met Daniel, kind, seeming, attentive, generous with his time in a way that felt like rain after a drought. 4 months in, she learned through a friend of a friend, in hushed and frightened tones, exactly which family Daniel belonged to and exactly what that family did to people who crossed them. She ended it within the week and didn't look back. Not even when he called, not even when he showed up outside her apartment once, apologizing for something she never fully understood the danger of until much later. When her aunt in Connecticut mentioned a housekeeping position with good pay and lodging included, Cassandra had seen it as an escape hatch. Distance from Ohio, distance from Daniel's shadow, a chance to save enough to finish her credentials and go back to teaching for good. She never imagined the escape would lead her into a house even more entangled with the same dangerous world she'd fled, or that the woman set to marry her new employer would one day use that fear as a weapon. She hadn't told anyone the full truth in 9 months. Tonight, it seemed, the truth was coming out whether she was ready or not. Jiang Sung sat alone in his study for nearly 20 minutes after Cassandra left, staring at the closed door, turning over a decision he already knew he had to make, and dreading everything it would cost him to make it. Ending things with Choi Hwang wasn't a private matter, not in his world. It meant unraveling an alliance his own father had spent a decade cultivating with her family, an alliance that kept two organizations from open conflict over territory neither side wanted to lose. It meant explaining to his own men why the boss had walked away from a merger of power for the sake of a maid's dignity, in a world where dignity rarely factored into anyone's calculations. It meant, possibly, war, quiet, simmering, the kind that could take years to surface and decades to resolve. He thought of his father, long since retired, who had built this empire on the belief that strength meant never showing weakness, never letting sentiment interfere with strategy. He thought of what his father would say if he could see him now, agonizing over a woman who scrubbed floors instead of a treaty that protected a fortune. And then he thought of Emma's small voice on the phone, of Cassandra's shoulders bent low over a wine stain, of 9 months of silence that had nearly gone unnoticed forever, and he understood, with a clarity that surprised him, that he no longer cared what his father would have done. "Some things are worth the war," he said quietly to the empty room, and reached for his phone to call Choi Hwang back into the study. Choi Hwang was still standing rigid by the fireplace when Jiang Sung reappeared alone, having left Cassandra and Emma in the care of a trusted housekeeper. Guests had begun murmuring amongst themselves, sensing something had shifted irreversibly in the last 10 minutes, though none dared ask what. "We need to talk," Jiang Sung said, privately. Now, Choi Hwang's voice had regained its polished composure, though something brittle vibrated beneath it. "In front of our guests, you're going to—" "Now, Hwang," she followed him into the study, arms crossed, chin lifted in the posture she always carried, as though the room itself owed her deference simply for existing in it. The door closed behind them with a sound that landed like a verdict. "This is about the maid," Choi Hwang said before he could speak, disbelief coating every word. "You pulled me away from our own engagement party, in front of everyone we know, because of the maid. I pulled you away because you've spent 9 months torturing a woman under my own roof, and I failed to notice it, and that failure is mine to carry, but what you did to her, that belongs entirely to you." "She's staff, Jiang. Staff gets corrected when they perform poorly. That is not torture. That is basic household management." "She told me you erase her name and call her the help in front of me specifically, as though my presence makes the insult sweeter. She told me you blamed her tonight for wine you spilled yourself. She told me this has happened 3 separate times now, always staged in front of an audience. Explain to me how any of that qualifies as management." Something colder slid across Choi Hwang's face, replacing irritation entirely. "You want to know why I've been hard on her? Fine, I'll tell you exactly why, and you're not going to like the answer." She crossed to the window, arms folded tight across her chest, voice dropping into something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. "Your precious Cassandra isn't who she's pretended to be this entire time, Jiang. Before she came crawling into your house with her tragic single mother story, she was involved with a man from the Moon family. You remember the Moons, don't you? Your father's old rivals, the ones who burned your Newark warehouses to the ground 3 years ago, and cost this family $11 million in a single night." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees at once. "That's a lie," Jiang Sung said, though something in his voice had already begun to fracture. "Is it? I recognized her the very first week she started here. I said nothing because I wanted to watch her, wanted to see whether she was a plant sent to feed information back to them, or simply an idiot who stumbled into the wrong house by accident. 9 months of watching her, and you're going to stand there and call me the villain for exercising caution with a woman who might be an active security risk to everything your father built? You never told me any of this." "Because I didn't need your permission to protect this family," Choi Hwang snapped, voice rising now, cracks finally showing through 9 months of careful composure. "And because I knew exactly how you'd react, you'd get soft exactly the way you're getting soft right now, defending her instead of asking the only question that actually matters. Ask her about the Moon family, Jiang. Ask her and watch her face when she can't deny it. This is the twist you didn't see coming, and it's about to change everything. If you're invested in this story, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me whether you think Choi Hwang is telling the truth or twisting something small into something monstrous. We're only getting started." Jiang Sung found Cassandra an hour later in the small staff quarters, Emma finally asleep against her side after a long, exhausting night. Her arm curled protectively around her daughter, even in stillness. Cassandra startled at the knock, easing carefully off the bed so as not to wake Emma, stepping into the hallway and pulling the door shut behind her. "Is something wrong?" she whispered, reading the tension carved into his face immediately. "I need to ask you something, and I need the complete truth, no matter how it sounds." He hesitated, then said it plainly. "Do you know a man from the Moon family?" Cassandra's face didn't crumble the way he half expected. Instead, something tired and resigned settled over her features, as though she'd been waiting for this exact question since the day she first walked through the estate's front gate. "His name is Daniel," she said quietly. "We dated for 4 months, almost 2 years before I ever set foot in this house. I didn't know who his family was until it ended, until I overheard something at a mutual friend's party that made my blood run cold. By the time I understood what he actually was, I was already gone, already terrified, already looking for any job far enough away from that world to feel safe again. I took this position because it was as far from that life as I could get without leaving the state entirely. I never said anything because I was afraid of exactly this moment, the moment someone finally connected the dots and decided I was dangerous instead of just unlucky." "Do you think that? That you're dangerous?" "No," she said, voice steadier now, something fierce rising underneath the fear. "I think I'm a woman who made one bad decision in her 20s that has absolutely nothing to do with who I am today, or what I'd ever do to put my daughter in harm's way." Jiang Sung studied her for a long, quiet moment, the exhaustion carved permanently into her face now, the fierce protectiveness she'd shown even half asleep, the 9 months of silent suffering she'd swallowed whole rather than risk the only stability she and Emma had left. "I believe you," he said finally, "and I think Choi Hwang used something small and human because it was convenient, not because it was ever actually true." Relief broke across Cassandra's face so suddenly it looked almost painful to witness. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what it means to hear someone say that to me, and mean it." "I do, actually," Jiang Sung said quietly, "because tonight is the first time in longer than I care to admit that someone told me something true, instead of something convenient." If this moment has you feeling something, don't scroll past without hitting that subscribe button. We are far from done, and what happens next is going to test everything these two people just started to believe in each other. Comment below, and let's keep this story moving. The days that followed felt, to Cassandra, like waking slowly from a fever she hadn't fully realized she'd been living inside for the better part of a year. Jiang Sung ended his engagement to Choi Hwang publicly, formally, without a shred of apology owed or offered, a decision that sent ripples through every corner of his organization within hours. Men who had never once acknowledged Cassandra's existence in 9 months now nodded to her respectfully in hallways. Her wages doubled before she could even think to ask. Jiang Sung personally arranged and quietly funded her enrollment in an online teaching certification program, brushing off her protests with a firmness that left no room for argument. Not everyone within the household accepted the shift quietly. The head housekeeper, a stern older woman named Inez who had worked for Jiang Sung's family for over a decade, pulled Cassandra aside in the pantry less than a week later. "You understand what you've done, don't you?" Inez said, not unkindly, but with clear warning in her voice. "You've made yourself a target in a world you don't fully understand. Choi Hwang's family does not forget humiliation, and Mr. Jiang, for all his good intentions right now, cannot protect you from everything." "I didn't ask for any of this," Cassandra said quietly. "I just wanted to survive." "I know," Inez said, softening slightly. "That's exactly why I'm telling you. Be careful, watch your back, and watch Emma's." Cassandra carried that warning with her for days afterward, a low hum of dread beneath the relief, and it turned out to be entirely justified. "You think this is over?" Choi Hwang hissed, cornering Cassandra outside the kitchen exactly 3 days after the broken engagement, voice pitched low enough that no passing staff could overhear. "You think a raise and a title erase what you are? Everyone in this house knows about the Moon family now. I made certain of that before I left this house tonight." Cassandra's hands curled into fists at her sides, 9 months of swallowed rage finally rising hot and fast in her chest. "I never asked for your permission to exist in this house, Choi Hwang, and I am completely done asking for it." "You should be more careful," Choi Hwang said, voice dropping into something colder, quieter, far more dangerous than her usual practiced cruelty. "My family does not lose gracefully, neither do the people connected to us. You have a daughter, don't you? A pretty, clever little thing. I would truly hate for anything unfortunate to happen to her simply because her mother forgot her place in this world." The threat landed like ice water straight down Cassandra's spine. She opened her mouth to respond, but Choi Hwang was already walking away, heels clicking sharply against the marble as though nothing at all had happened. Cassandra told Jiang Sung everything that same night, her voice shaking with a fear she hadn't allowed herself to fully feel, until the words finally left her mouth. Jiang Sung's expression went perfectly, terrifyingly still. "She threatened Emma directly? She said she'd hate for anything to happen to her." Jiang Sung was already crossing to the door, already reaching for his phone, already becoming the version of himself his enemies had learned to fear over the years, instead of the man who had quietly fallen for a woman who once scrubbed his marble floors on her knees. "That was a mistake on her part," he said, voice low and final. "She just made this entirely personal." Comment below, right now if you saw this coming, because Choi Hwang was never, ever going to walk away from this without a fight. Like this video if you're rooting hard for Cassandra and Emma at this point in the story, because things are about to escalate fast. The very next afternoon, before Jiang Sung had even finished tightening security around the estate, Cassandra received a call from an unknown number while walking to her car after class. A woman's voice, clipped and unfamiliar, informed her that a large, anonymous donation had been quietly withdrawn from the scholarship fund covering part of her certification tuition, and that her enrollment status was now under review, pending further verification of her background. Cassandra sat frozen in the driver's seat for 10 full minutes after the call ended, hands trembling, before she understood exactly whose reach that was. She called Jiang Sung immediately, and by that evening the funding had been quietly restored through an untraceable private trust, along with 2 additional security details assigned specifically to the community college campus without Cassandra's knowledge, a decision Jiang Sung would only reveal to her much later, after the parking structure incident made his caution retroactively, terrifyingly justified. 2 nights later, a black sedan idled outside the estate's staff entrance for nearly 11 minutes before security finally flagged it. By the time Jiang Sung's men reached the vehicle, it had already vanished, though not before a man matching no known household staff had approached Emma's daycare pickup line and asked the teacher's aide for her full name and schedule, information the aide thankfully refused outright to release. Jiang Sung arrived at the daycare within 20 minutes of the call, his expression carved from stone, three of his most trusted men flanking him in tight formation. Cassandra was already there, Emma clutched so tightly against her chest the little girl finally squirmed in protest. "Mommy, you're squishing me," Emma complained, and despite the terror still coursing through her, Cassandra let out a broken, disbelieving laugh and pressed a shaking kiss into her daughter's hair. "She's not getting anywhere near either of you again," Jiang Sung said, kneeling down to Emma's eye level, his voice gentler than Cassandra had ever heard it, though fury still simmered visibly just beneath the surface. "I promise you that, Emma. Do you understand me completely? You and your mother are safe. I will not let anything happen to either of you. Ever." Emma studied him with that same solemn, unblinking seriousness only small children seem capable of summoning. "You came when I called," she said simply. "You'll come again if I ever need you to." "Every single time," Jiang Sung said, voice thick with something he didn't try to hide. "For the rest of your life, if that's what you need from me." That night, back at the estate, Emma refused to sleep in her own small bed for the first time since they'd arrived a year earlier, crawling instead into Cassandra's arms and burying her face against her mother's collarbone. "Is the mean lady going to take me?" Emma whispered, voice small in a way that broke something fresh open in Cassandra's chest. "No, baby. Never. I promise you with everything I am, that woman will never lay a hand on you." Cassandra pressed her lips to the crown of Emma's head, rocking her gently the way she had when Emma was an infant, and the world felt just as frightening, just as uncertain. "You were so brave today. Do you know that? You didn't cry. You didn't panic. You just held on to me and let the grown-ups handle the scary parts. That's exactly what you're supposed to do." "I was scared," Emma admitted quietly. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, sweetheart. It means you feel scared and you keep going anyway. You've been doing that since the night you picked up that phone. You've been braver than most adults I know." Emma considered this for a long moment, thumb tucked against her lips, the way she did when she was working through something important. "Papa Jiang was scared too," she said finally. "I saw his hands shaking when he was talking to me. But he didn't run away either." Cassandra's breath caught at the easy, unconscious way her daughter had already claimed him as family, long before either adult had said the word out loud. "No," she whispered. "He didn't run away either." That night, long after Emma had finally cried herself to sleep between them, Jiang Sung sat across from Cassandra in his study, two untouched glasses of whiskey between them, and finally said the truth he'd been circling for weeks. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand it has nothing to do with pity, or guilt, or obligation. This is about you. Only you." "Jiang, let me finish, please." He exhaled slowly. "I've spent my entire adult life building something powerful enough that nothing could ever touch it, or me, or anyone connected to it. I believed that was the entire job. Build the empire. Defend the empire. I never once stopped to consider who was scrubbing my floors while I did it. I never considered that someone in my own house was crying alone in a laundry room nearly every single night while I sat congratulating myself in boardrooms. It took your daughter calling me, personally, to make me see what should have been obvious from the very beginning. I don't deserve any credit for finally noticing, but I am asking you, honestly, to let me try to become someone worth noticing you back." Cassandra's eyes filled instantly, and this time, for once, in 9 long months, the tears weren't born of exhaustion or fear at all. "You already are," she whispered. "If you're not feeling something right now, are you even paying attention to this story? Comment your favorite line so far below. And if you haven't liked this video yet, now is exactly the time, because what's coming next changes absolutely everything." Choi Hwang did not disappear quietly into the background the way certain women might have in a gentler story, in a gentler world. She had spent her entire life being obeyed without question, and being discarded, publicly, decisively, by a man she'd expected to marry into permanent power, was not a humiliation she intended to absorb alone or silently. She met with her cousin, a lieutenant within her family's organization, in a private room above a restaurant in Koreatown exactly 3 weeks after the broken engagement. "Jiang Sung humiliated our entire family," she said, voice tight with something caught between rage and pure desperation. "He chose a maid over an alliance our fathers spent an entire decade carefully building. That cannot simply stand unanswered." "What exactly do you want done?" her cousin asked carefully. "I want him to understand precisely what it costs to humiliate us this publicly. I want him afraid of what he threw away so carelessly. That is extremely dangerous territory to enter, Hwang. He is not a man anyone provokes lightly, and you know that better than most." "He already provoked me," Choi Hwang snapped, composure cracking further. "I want the woman gone, not dead. I'm not some monster, whatever he apparently thinks of me now. But gone, somewhere far enough away that she stops being a daily, living reminder of exactly what he chose over us." Her cousin studied her for a long, considering moment. "And if she refuses to go quietly?" Choi Hwang's smile held nothing remotely warm in it at all. "Then we simply make that decision for her." 3 nights later, 2 men Cassandra didn't recognize approached her directly in the parking structure of the community college where she attended her evening teaching certification classes. She'd stayed late finishing a difficult exam. Emma, safely back at the estate with a nanny Jiang Sung, had personally vetted 3 separate times over. "Cassandra Williams," one of the men said, stepping deliberately into her path. "Choi Hwang sends her regards. She would like you to consider relocating somewhere significantly quieter. Somewhere far outside Jiang Sung's reach. For your daughter's continued safety, of course." Cassandra's pulse spiked violently into her throat, every instinct screaming at her to run, but she forced her voice to stay level. "You can tell Choi Hwang I am not going anywhere at all." "That is truly unfortunate," the second man said, and the casual, almost bored way he said it frightened her far more than any shout could have managed. "Because we were instructed to make this particular conversation memorable, should you refuse our request." Cassandra's hand had already found the phone in her pocket, thumb pressing hard against the single contact she'd saved under an emergency label just days after the broken engagement, Jiang Sung's private, direct line. She never got the chance to actually dial. The parking structure erupted into sudden chaos in the space of maybe 4 full seconds. 3 of Jiang Sung's own men, who had been quietly tailing Cassandra every single night since the daycare incident, without her knowledge or permission, closed in fast from the surrounding shadows. What followed was brutal, efficient, and entirely over before Cassandra could fully process what was happening around her. The 2 men who had approached her were subdued, disarmed, and gone within minutes, dragged bodily into a waiting van that peeled out of the structure before campus security had even arrived on scene. Jiang Sung himself arrived 11 minutes later, breathless in a way Cassandra had genuinely never witnessed before, crossing the entire parking structure in long, urgent strides before pulling her into his arms without a single word. She was shaking uncontrollably, adrenaline finally catching up with her all at once, and he simply held her through it, murmuring something low and steady against her hair that she couldn't quite make out, but understood completely anyway. "I should have told you I had men watching over you," he said finally, pulling back just enough to search her face. "I didn't want to frighten you further. That was a mistake on my part, and I won't make it again." "She's not going to stop," Cassandra whispered. "Is she?" Jiang Sung's expression hardened into something Cassandra hadn't seen from him before. Not the controlled, measured boss, not the tender man who'd knelt to Emma's eye level at the daycare, but something older and considerably colder, forged from more than a decade of holding a dangerous empire together through sheer force of will alone. "No," he said quietly. "She's not going to stop. Which means I'm entirely done being patient with her." This is where things get real, and if you've made it this far, you already know this story was never going to end easy. Like this video right now, if you believe Jiang Sung is about to do something he cannot take back. Subscribe if you want to see exactly how far he's willing to go to protect what belongs to him now. Let's finish this together. Jiang Sung called a meeting with Choi Hwang's entire family the following morning. Not privately, not quietly, but in full and deliberate view of both organizations' senior leadership, a calculated humiliation designed to mirror precisely what Choi Hwang had inflicted on Cassandra for 9 long, quiet months. Your daughter sent armed men after a woman and a child under my direct protection, Jiang Sung said to Choi Hwang's father, his voice level and cold enough that grown men throughout the room visibly shifted in their seats. I am not remotely interested in receiving an apology. I am interested in seeing this end, permanently, starting today. Choi Hwang's father, a heavy-set man with cold, calculating eyes that missed absolutely nothing, turned toward his daughter with an expression that looked distinctly like genuine disappointment. Is this true, Hwang? Choi Hwang's composure, so carefully maintained through weeks of quiet scheming, finally cracked wide open entirely. He humiliated our entire family in front of everyone we've ever known. He chose a maid over an alliance you personally spent a decade building, and I was simply expected to accept that quietly, without response. You were expected to handle your humiliation with actual dignity, her father snapped, voice sharp with fury of his own. Not send armed men to threaten an innocent child. Do you fully understand what you have done here? You have handed Jiang Sung every single justification he could ever need to end this alliance completely. And worse, you have made this entire family look as though we sanction violence against children. That is not strength, Hwang. That is pure recklessness that costs us absolutely everything we've built. Father, please, enough. He turned back toward Jiang Sung, jaw tight with barely restrained fury directed, Cassandra suspected, as much at his own daughter as at the larger situation itself. This will never happen again. You have my personal word on that, and you have my sincere apology, formally, for what my daughter has done in my family's name. She will not come near your household, or the people within it, ever again. Choi Hwang stared at her own father, as though he had physically struck her, betrayal and fury warring violently across her face in equal measure. You're choosing his side over your own daughter's side? I am choosing whatever keeps this family from being utterly destroyed by your wounded pride, her father said quietly, wearily. Something you should have seriously considered before you sent armed men after an innocent child. Choi Hwang left the meeting in complete silence, her composure lying entirely in ruins, and Cassandra, watching from a discreet distance at Jiang Sung's specific request, close enough to witness the reckoning, but safely far enough to remain protected, felt something loosen fully in her chest for the first time in nearly a full year. We're deep in this story now, and the tension is about to break wide open. If you believe justice is finally coming, drop a comment saying so below. Like this video if Choi Hwang's reckoning felt earned to you. We're not finished yet. Stick around. It wasn't entirely over, not completely, not all at once. Choi Hwang spent several months afterward attempting small, increasingly petty acts of interference, spreading rumors through her remaining social circles, attempting repeatedly to reach Jiang Sung through mutual associates, once even appearing unannounced at a charity gala he attended, only to be quietly and firmly escorted out by his security detail before she could manufacture a scene. But the genuine danger, the real threat that had put both Cassandra and Emma in true peril, had ended decisively in that room, with a father finally choosing consequence over blind pride and a mafia boss choosing a maid over an empire's convenient cold alliance. Within his own organization, Jiang Sung's decision did not go entirely unquestioned. One of his senior lieutenants, a man named Tai Yang who had served his father before him, requested a private meeting 2 weeks after the broken engagement, closing the office door with a caution that told Jiang Sung exactly how delicate the conversation would be. The men are asking questions, Taeyang said carefully. Not disloyal questions, concerned ones. They want to know if the boss's judgment can still be trusted when a household matter outweighs a decade-long alliance. And what do you think, Taeyang? Jiang Sung asked, leaning back in his chair, studying the older man who had watched him grow from a boy into the head of an empire. I think, Taeyang said slowly, that I have followed men who confused cruelty for strength, and I watched that cruelty eventually rot everything they built from the inside out. I think a man who protects the people beneath his own roof, even when it costs him something, is a man worth following far longer than one who only protects his interests. But I also think you should say that to the men yourself, so they hear conviction instead of rumor. Jiang Sung called an assembly the following morning, addressing his full organization for the first time in years about something other than territory or profit. Some of you are wondering whether I made the right decision, he said, standing before rows of men who had built their loyalty on his father's example of controlled, unemotional strength. I want to be clear, I did not break that engagement because I was weak. I broke it because I discovered cruelty operating under my own roof for 9 months, unnoticed, and I refused to keep marrying convenience over conscience. If that makes me appear weaker to you, then I'm asking you to reconsider what strength actually means. I intend to build something that outlasts fear. I hope you'll still be standing beside me when it does. The silence that followed was heavy, uncertain, and then slowly, Taeyang began to clap, and one by one, the room followed, and Jiang Sung understood, watching it happen, that he had just won something far more lasting than any alliance Choi Hwang's family could have offered him. 6 months passed, and Cassandra would later say that the peace felt stranger than the fear ever had, like a muscle she'd forgotten how to use finally beginning to remember its shape. The first real test of that peace came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Choi Hwang's family meeting, when Cassandra sat for her first proctored certification exam in a community college testing center, palms sweating, certain she'd fail. She didn't fail. She scored higher than she'd allowed herself to hope, and when she called Jiang Sung from the parking lot to tell him, his voice cracked with a pride so unguarded it startled her. I knew you would, he said. I never doubted it for a second. You're allowed to say you're proud of me, you know, Cassandra said, laughing through unexpected tears. It won't kill you. I'm proud of you, he said. And then, quieter, almost to himself, I don't think I've said that out loud to anyone in years. The following month brought a smaller, quieter kind of victory. Emma, now 4, had started asking for Jiang Sung by name every evening, tugging at Cassandra's sleeve at dinner time to ask when Papa Jiang would be home from his meetings, a title neither adult had suggested, but which Emma had simply decided on her own, the way small children often claim the truths adults are too afraid to name aloud. The first time Jiang Sung heard it, he'd gone completely still in the kitchen doorway, papers forgotten in his hand, something raw and unguarded moving across his face before he managed to say anything at all. She's calling me that, he said to Cassandra later that night, voice thick with something between disbelief and wonder. Does it bother you? No, he said immediately. No, it's just, I never thought I'd be given something like that. Not in this life. Not with everything I am. You're more than what you are in that world, Jiang, Cassandra said gently. Emma sees that. I see it too. 3 months into that fragile new peace, Jiang Sung began arriving home earlier. Not every night. His world rarely allowed for that kind of consistency, but often enough that Emma began setting the table for 3 without being asked. Often enough that Cassandra stopped bracing herself each evening for the possibility that this version of her life might disappear as suddenly as it had arrived. He learned, without anyone teaching him, that Emma preferred her apples sliced rather than whole, that she refused to sleep without a specific stuffed rabbit tucked beneath her chin, that she asked the same 3 questions every single night before bed. Are we safe? Are you staying? Will you be here tomorrow? And that answering them patiently, every single night, mattered more to her than any grand gesture ever could. Why do you ask me that every night? He asked her gently one evening, tucking the blanket around her shoulders. You know the answer already. Because you always tell me the truth, Emma said simply, already half asleep. Mommy used to tell me things would be okay, even when they weren't. You don't do that. You just tell me the real answer, even when it's scary. Jiang Sung sat with that for a long moment after she'd drifted off, understanding for the first time the particular, precious weight of being trusted by a child who had learned, the hard way, exactly what it cost to trust the wrong adults. Papa Jiang, Emma said one quiet evening 5 months after the parking structure incident, tugging insistently at his sleeve while he reviewed paperwork at the kitchen table. Are you going to marry my mommy? Jiang Sung set his pen down slowly, glancing toward the doorway where Cassandra stood frozen mid-step, a dish towel still clutched in her hands, her entire body gone still with the sudden weight of the question. Would that be all right with you? He asked Emma seriously, as though her answer genuinely mattered more than anything else in the entire world to him. Emma considered this question with the full gravity only a 4-year-old could bring to bear on such a decision. Yes, she said, finally, decisively. Because you make mommy laugh now, she didn't used to laugh like that before you. Cassandra's eyes filled instantly with tears, and Jiang Sung looked at her over their daughter's head with an expression so completely open, so entirely unguarded, that it stole the breath right out of her chest. I'll take that as full permission, then, he said quietly, voice thick with something he no longer bothered trying to hide from either of them. We're almost at the end of this story, and it's about to get emotional. If this journey has meant something to you, make sure you've hit subscribe, because there is more where this came from. Drop a comment with your favorite character. Let's finish this together. 1 full year after the phone call that started everything, on a quiet evening in the estate's private garden, Jiang Sung got down on one knee in front of Cassandra, while Emma stood beside them both, clutching a fistful of wildflowers she had insisted on picking herself specifically for the occasion. I built an entire empire because I believed power was the only thing in this world worth protecting, Jiang Sung said, his voice steady despite the emotion clearly threatening to break through it. Completely. It took a 3-year-old girl calling me on a phone to teach me that the only thing actually worth protecting had been sitting quietly in my own house this entire time, scrubbing floors and raising a daughter braver than I have ever managed to be in my whole life. I used to think love was something you built like an empire, brick by careful brick, defended at all costs. Now I know love is something you notice, something you almost missed entirely because you were too busy building walls to keep everyone else out. Cassandra Williams, will you marry me? Emma, unable to contain herself a moment longer, burst out before her mother could even answer. I knew it. I told you so, Mommy. Cassandra laughed through fresh tears, pulling both of them into her arms at once, holding on as tightly as she possibly could. Yes, she said, voice breaking with joy. Yes, 1,000 times over. Yes. I never thought I'd get to say that word again and mean it the way I mean it right now. I love you, Jiang Sung said quietly, forehead pressed to hers, Emma still wrapped between them. I love you, and I love her, and I am never going to stop being grateful that a 3-year-old girl was brave enough to make a phone call I almost didn't answer. I love you too, Cassandra whispered back, both of you, more than I know how to say. The months leading up to the wedding were, by Cassandra's own quiet admission to Inez one evening in the kitchen, the first truly peaceful stretch of her adult life. She began substitute teaching at a local elementary school while finishing her final credentialing requirements, coming home each evening to Emma's excited retellings of her day and Jiang Sung's steady, patient presence at the dinner table. A presence that had once felt distant and unreachable, and now felt like the safest place she knew. Choi Hwang's name came up less and less, a fading shadow at the edges of a life that no longer had room for her cruelty. I used to think I'd feel guilty, being this happy, Cassandra confided to Inez one evening, watching Emma and Jiang Sung through the kitchen window, laughing over something in the garden. Like happiness was something that got taken away from women like me eventually, like I wasn't allowed to keep it. You've earned every second of it, Inez said firmly. Don't you dare feel guilty for surviving, and don't you dare feel guilty for finally being loved the way you should have been all along. Cassandra's mother arrived from Ohio 3 days before the wedding, and on the first night, sitting together on the porch long after Emma had gone to sleep, She took her daughter's hand and studied her for a long, quiet moment. "You look different," her mother said finally. "Lighter. I haven't seen you look like this since before you got pregnant. Since before that man broke something in you that I didn't think would ever fully heal." "I didn't think it would either," Cassandra admitted. "For a long time, I thought this was just what my life was going to be. Surviving, getting by. I didn't let myself imagine anything more than that. And now?" Cassandra looked out at the garden where Jiang Sung and Emma were chasing fireflies in the fading light, Emma's laughter carrying clear and bright across the lawn. "Now, I let myself imagine everything," she said softly. "And somehow, it's actually coming true." Her mother squeezed her hand. "That little girl of yours," she said, voice thick with emotion. "She saved you. Do you understand that? She saved all of you." "I know," Cassandra whispered. "I think about that every single day. There were nights in that laundry room when I truly believed no one was ever going to come for us. Not because I'd stopped hoping, but because hope had stopped feeling like something safe to hold on to. And then a 3-year-old picked up a phone, and everything I thought I knew about how the world treated women like me turned out to be wrong." Her mother wiped her eyes, smiling through the tears. "Don't waste any more time being surprised that you deserve this," she said gently. "You always did, every single day of this hard, exhausting journey. It just took the world a little longer than it should have to finally catch up to the truth you always carried inside you." At their wedding, held quietly in that very same garden 6 months later, Jiang Sung stood before their small gathering of guests. Cassandra's mother flown in specially from Ohio, a handful of deeply trusted allies, and Emma standing proudly beside them both in a small white dress she had picked out herself, and delivered a toast that surprised absolutely everyone who had expected the usual empty language of wealth and power from a man in his position. "I used to believe love meant grand gestured gifts," he said, his eyes finding Cassandra's steadily across the small crowd. "Flowers, speeches, empires built entirely to impress the world. I don't believe any of that anymore. Love is paying attention. It's noticing the person quietly holding everything together while the rest of the world looks straight past her, without ever seeing. It's a little girl brave enough to make one phone call that changed 4 lives forever. I owe everything genuinely good in my life now. To a phone call I very nearly didn't answer, and to a woman who taught her daughter to be brave even when the whole world had taught her that silence was safer." He paused, looking down at Emma, who beamed up at him with wildflowers still clutched in one small fist. "And to Emma, the bravest person I have ever known, at any age. You saved us all before any of the adults in your life had the courage to save ourselves. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that phone call." Cassandra Williams became, in the years that followed, one of the most beloved kindergarten teachers throughout her entire district. Known widely for a patience and quiet strength her students' parents often remarked on without ever once knowing its true origin. She kept a single wildflower pressed and framed on her classroom desk, a quiet reminder of the garden where her whole life had changed twice over. Emma grew into a confident, outspoken young girl who never once doubted that her voice genuinely mattered in this world, because she had learned at only 3 years old that even the smallest voice imaginable could change absolutely everything. Choi Hwang eventually married into another family entirely, her father brokering a considerably quieter, far less prestigious alliance than the one she had lost through her own recklessness. Those who remembered the full truth of what happened never forgot the woman hiding beneath that polished exterior, no matter how carefully she attempted to rebuild her image in the years that slowly followed. Some said she grew bitter with time. Others said she simply grew quiet, the way people do when the story they told about themselves finally stops matching the truth everyone else remembers. And Jiang Sung, the man once known throughout 2 organizations only for the empire he had built and the fear he commanded, became known for something else entirely in the small, private corners of his life that mattered most. A man who learned, almost too late to matter, that the quietest people in any room are so often the ones most worth listening to, and that the truest measure of power was never how much fear a man could command, but how gently he could hold the people who trusted him with their whole hearts. Years later, when Emma was old enough to understand the full weight of what her 3-year-old self had done, Cassandra sat her down and told her the whole story from the beginning. The wine stain, the laundry room, the phone number memorized like a lullaby. Emma listened quietly, then asked the only question that seemed to matter to her. "Was I scared?" "You didn't look scared," Cassandra said. "You looked like you knew exactly what you were doing." Emma considered that for a long moment. "I think I was scared," she said finally. "I just loved you more than I was scared." Cassandra pulled her daughter into her arms, the same way she had 100 times before, in laundry rooms and daycare parking lots and quiet bedrooms at the end of frightening days, and understood, finally and completely, that this was the whole of it. Not the empire, not the alliance, not even the marriage that had followed. Just a mother and a daughter who had loved each other fiercely enough to survive, and a man who had finally learned to notice what love actually required of him. This story was never really about wealth, or power, or even simple romance. It was about the courage it takes to speak up when everyone around you has spent months teaching you to stay silent, and the humility it takes to truly listen when someone finally does. It was about a mother who endured what no one should have to endure, and a daughter who refused, even at 3 years old, to let that suffering go unanswered. If this story moved you even a little, make absolutely sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment below with your favorite moment from this entire journey, and share this with someone in your life who needs a reminder today that even the smallest voice imaginable can change everything. We'll see you in the next one.